Hi, my name is Yunseo. All of you would have heard of the name Martin Luther King Jr. and know what he did to form the society that we are living in today. In addition to his name, you know he is famous for his 1963 I Have a Dream speech. But was his dream fully realized? To some, they see that we still have some work to do to bring King's dream into reality, but they do not know what we need to do individually to get closer to it. Our role seems small compared to what King did in the past and what larger institutions like the government can do today. This can especially be felt in education, as all people tend to be taught the same foundations using similar methods, which can make it hard for people to even recognize problems that exist in education and society. This presentation will further elaborate on these problems that we have in education with a focus on standard English education that keep people from achieving the dream. It will also include my personal experience in English education to show how this is a general problem that many go through. Ultimately, through the lens of Martin Luther King Jr.'s vision, it will suggest that code meshing, a method of creating one's own English based on their identities, is a significant change we can make in English education to help both individuals and society fully achieve King's dreams. The presentation will explore various parts, but the core parts that are focused is the references of other speeches and ideals and use of rhetoric in the I Have a Dream speech, what exactly it means to achieve the dreams of King today, and how the I Have a Dream speech relates to code meshing. As I am sure you know, Martin Luther King Jr. was a Baptist minister and social activist in the civil rights and peace movement. His dream was to fight for freedom and inequality peacefully through protest. This dream motivated him to always work for civil rights and peace, which included leading marches and giving various speeches in public events. The I Have a Dream speech is one of the most visible and successful results of what he stood for in pursuing his dreams. There are many other speeches of King that are famous, but the reason why I Have a Dream is so significant is because it reflects the dreams he had more directly and memorably than any of his other speeches. He did so by bringing in and referencing the ideals of other speeches and creating an interpretive rhetorical style. The quote, "I have a dream that my 4 children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin but the content of their character," indicate profoundly the society of equal civil rights that he dreams of. Anyone that hears this speech for the first time can immediately realize what King has aimed for throughout his entire life. To help create this image for listeners, the I Have a Dream speech references various lines in other famous speeches, such as the Gettysburg Address, Emancipation Proclamation, and others. By including these lines, King allows people who hear the speech to feel familiar with his message and reminds the audience of the ideals that each of these past speeches had as well. As they get reminded, they realize the message of I Have a Dream clearly and quickly. I Have a Dream starts with 5 score years ago, which was also similar to the start of Gettysburg Address. By including this line, King encourages the audience to recall that the Civil War was also connected to the fight for freedom and equality for all. Another line in the speech, "It came as a joyous daybreak to end the long night of their captivity," is from the Emancipation Proclamation, which symbolized the promise of freedom for slaves during the Civil War when freedom depended on the Union's victory. Through these and other lines that King included in I Have a Dream, he blended the dreams of each speech with his own. In doing so, he created a message of deep importance that people still remember and find significant today. In addition, King's I Have a Dream speech included 3 main rhetorical strategies to convey his dreams more clearly. The first is voice merging, the combining of one's own voice with religious predecessors and other people's thoughts. King's voice merging included his own thoughts for civil rights and those of the religious predecessors he had as a Baptist minister. The next rhetorical tool he used is prophetic voice, which is the approach of urging people to take action to recover society from a state of corruption. It enables the speaker to address their big crowd effectively and increases the credibility of what they are saying. Credibility for King was especially meaningful because he was persuading the crowd to believe in and join his vision. For instance, when King declares, "Now is the time to make justice a reality for all of God's children," he is urging the public to action, arguing that the present moment is the time to stand up for peace and civil rights in America. This rhetorical strategy leads the crowd to realize the seriousness of problems in their society and their actions within it. The last rhetorical device is dynamic spectacle, which relies on the context of drama and tension in which it was situated. Like prophetic voice, it helps people join an action. For this speech and time, the context was the nonviolent civil rights movement King was leading to achieve his dreams for all. Dynamic spectacle reinforced King's dream because of this period, when people on a large scale started to feel the need to rebuild a society that was full of discrimination. The combination of these radical factors allowed I Have a Dream to be delivered effectively and be remembered as one of King's best speeches. The methods of how exactly to achieve the dream of King have continued to be presented by people who were next to King when he was alive. 28 years after his death, the magazine interviewed people that used to know King when he was alive. The interviews specifically asked about what individuals or the government can do to get closer to King's ideal world where his dreams are accomplished. Among many people, 2 interviews stood out. The first one was with Joseph P. Lowry, who was an American minister in the United Methodist Church and King's fellow leader in the civil rights movement. Fundamentally, his answer to the question was that individuals should peacefully aim to create a society where all are respected in their identities. His answer connects to establishing one's own identity in education as well. The second interview that stood out was that of Yolanda King, who provided a different answer from Lowry to the same question. Yolanda King is the first daughter of Martin Luther King Jr. and also took part in the civil rights movement, following in the footsteps of her father. To fulfill the dreams of her father, she talked about the need for us to figure out a way to make sure that we all contribute by providing more opportunities for everyone in society. If equal chances are not given, it is eliminating the potential that people have because of their identity. In terms of education, her idea suggests that the education system must ensure that anyone can learn easily in education. Also, equal opportunities must be provided regardless of people's identities in education. Equal chances in education are what will create a chance for them to develop their abilities and defend themselves from discrimination in the long term. The 2 interviews are essential in the context of King's dreams today because Lowry and King are the ones who knew Dr. King very well and at the same time know what to do both as a social activist for civil rights and everyday citizens. The 2 perspectives that they provide stretch into how we can chase the dream of King in the present education system. Nearly 60 years after King's speech, many may feel that we are living in a society of less discrimination. However, serious problems continue to be seen today. First, various violent events related to inequality are occurring. One of the most recent and well-known events is the death of George Floyd. His death reflects what a big problem discrimination is. Even the ongoing protests that happen in support of the rights of all are not peaceful anymore. They involve violence and weapons and even hurt or affect people that were not involved in the movement. This form of protest goes against King's dreams to peacefully gain civil rights. Moreover, on a nonviolent scale, people's identities are neglected in the frame of language and its education. People are taught standard English, an approach that forces people to hide their identity in literacy and the language they use every day. If individuals' identities are not respected and valued early on and throughout society, discrimination will only continue to worsen. This state clearly shows that there is more left for us to do to achieve the dreams that King stood for in the past. To more deeply discuss this connection to language education, we can see an interesting connection to I Have a Dream. The various factors that King used in his speech, his use of rhetoric and references to other speeches, similarly represent a form of code meshing and hint that it is a way of achieving King's dreams within education. Gathering the ideals of other speeches with his own completely blended his dreams with the meaning that each speech carried. In a similar way, King's identities and background as a minister, social activist, and father produced his own unique and effective rhetorical style. These 2 traits share a similarity with code meshing, even as it applies to language, because it allows individuals to form their own English out of the unique identities they have. Therefore, King's dreams can even apply to the way we learn language from the time we are young. Before diving deeper into the concept of code meshing, I'd like to define it more completely. It is different from the standard English that we actually learn, which limits our identities from being shown. Standard English is what respects spelling, grammar, pronunciation, and others in the formal and informal speech and writing that is widely recognized and educated. On the other hand, code meshing blends dialects, international languages, local idioms, chat room lingo, and the rhetorical styles of various ethnic and cultural groups in both formal and informal speech acts. With these factors, it is a language that is formed out of every element of a person's identity. Through different experiences that people had in English education, we can find its significance in its ability to overcome the disadvantages that standard English has in education and the positive effects that it can bring to us. Many parents or teachers have limited those from the same minority group from showing their qualities by making them use standard English, and this can become a reason why they are disregarded. This is revealed in an article titled From Outside In. The author Melix was a black woman who was taught standard English and raised by her parents to hide her natural use of English in front of others to prevent her from being disregarded. Ironically, rather than supporting their own people to use language that reflects their identity, forcing them to hide it created the effect they were trying to avoid. Melix's experience showcases the importance of language education. For me personally, they also reminded me of my own experiences as a young child. My parents also limited me from using my experiences in my English writing or showing my identities to other people in America. They thought that my experiences as a Korean would not be understood and respected by Americans who have a different identity of their own. As for Melix, the result was that I was disregarded by others. As I grew up, I appreciated the fact that my parents wanted to protect me from discrimination, but now I truly believe that my experiences are the most efficient way I can support my ideas in literacy. Whether in Melix's experiences or my own, it seems undeniable that embracing our own language and identity is what will allow us to judge one another on the content of our character. Although code meshing needs to be taught to chase the dreams of king in education, the reality is that standard English is being taught instead. The struggles that students experience from learning standard English instead of code meshing are clearly shown in an article written by Wan, Chinks in My Armor Reclaiming One's Voice. It demonstrates her own difficulties in learning standard English as a foreigner who learned Chinese as her first language. She mentions that as she became familiar with standard English, she felt her identities being simultaneously lost and discriminated against because of her first language. She often mixed her Chinese accent in her English, which was strictly prohibited by her teachers and family. Her English speaking could only be understood by her mom, which tells how serious her accent was. It took her a long time to fully change her accent into what was understandable. Her story reflected my experience as an international student from Korea. I too was taught standard English from a young age, and I also encountered problems when I continued to mix the factors of Korean in my English. Like Juan, as I got used to standard English and the different structure in English literacy, I also felt that my identity as a Korean was lost. Unlike King, who formed his own rhetoric and pursued his values, I thought that it was obvious that my qualities would hide in my literacy. Like Juan, I felt I was also becoming a part of a society that discriminates against one another for their race and identities in English. Code meshing in language education is a key to moving towards King streams. Yet, code meshing can also be used in more diverse areas that directly influence our life as well. As we get more used to this method, we will be able to expand King streams not only within America but also around the world. This idea is supported by the article, The Place of World Englishes in Composition, Pluralization Continued. This article describes that English is a language that even more people will speak in the future. If code meshing is applied to English, it will be used more widely in academic writing by people from different cultures because it will be more convenient to use. In a similar yet surprising application, programming languages are another example of English and code meshing that deeply influences the world. Many of the most used programming languages are written in English. And as with our spoken languages, computer languages blend the languages people normally use with the instructions computers can understand. Specific actions and tools are given simple names. For example, print would be used to capture the meaning of several lines of code designed to put something on the screen. The significance of these computer programming languages can also be seen in every device that is used today. Thinking about this influence, as well as the impact of algorithms and the identities of the programmers who wrote them, we can understand that a future that uses code meshing will be one huge step closer to King streams. In conclusion, when we remember the significance of Martin Luther King Jr.'s I Have a Dream speech, we probably don't immediately think of education. We remember the civil rights movement, activists like Dr. King, Joseph P. Lowry, and many others. However, when I remember King's dream, where we all have respect for each other's unique identities, I remember the power of his language. With Code Mission, we can continue his efforts and work towards an education that achieves and honors King's dreams, valuing the identities of us all. It can address the problems caused by teaching standard English, help resolve the consequences of limiting identities within minority groups, and also expand King's dreams around the globe. To close, this last page is a list of sources and articles I cited. Thank you very much for your attention and listening to my presentation.